Hello. This is Lauren Burke, founder, CEO, and chief marketer with LJS Advisory. I am here today during our Female Founder Series for Women's History Month with Jackie Corbelli from BrightLine. Jackie is founder, CEO of BrightLine, but also many other businesses. She is a real industry powerhouse. I feel like we can all learn so much from Jackie's journey. So super excited to have her today to share the ins and outs, the highs and lows, and everything in between. So Jackie, without further ado, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you are right now, and your role at BrightLine and your other companies.
Thank you, Lauren, for asking me to speak and for your interest. I appreciate it, especially in a month like this one, and always happy to tell the parts of my story that might resonate and help other women achieve their dreams, even if they don't know what those are quite yet. So yeah. I am a mother of three and raised them in Westport. That's where I am right now. I also spend a lot of time in the city. Our two daughters are in college there. As you said, I founded a company in 2003 called BrightLine. That's a long time ago. And I guess one of the cool things to be doing is to be sitting here telling you about BrightLine as an ad tech entrepreneur and a startup technology CEO who actually weathered all of that time in between then and now. We both know how many different iterations that ad tech has gone through.
Totally.
I came into it, like most things I come into, thinking that some things were going to happen much more quickly than they did. I didn't have an intention of staying in television, media, marketech, and things like that for a good part of my career. Yeah. I did have a whole prior career in change management, restructuring and change management, and completely different industry.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so in the financial industry. So I sit here as someone who is experienced as an entrepreneur in ad tech and technology, but also, experienced a lot of things I think that were important to building this business and sticking it out from my prior career. So
I think that just is a testament to the versatility of women, right? Like, you don't have to be necessarily pigeonholed into something you've done your whole life. Like, recognize that skills are transferable, I feel like is so important. And you have demonstrated that throughout your career. It's funny. So when I was putting together this Female Founder Series and looking for founders specifically in the ad tech space, and I found you, Jackie, lucky me, but there's not a lot of women like you in ad tech. It is a very male dominated industry. So I'm so pleased, that you did this, and, you were probably one of the first, if not the first, I imagine. Is that true?
Definitely one of the first. I don't know if I was the first. And honestly, I came from a very male-dominated industry anyway, so that didn't affect me very much. Sort of went into it with a sort of, if not me, then who? And we don't know unless we try kind of thing. So yeah, but it's been quite the journey. And there are more women tech entrepreneurs and ad tech now, but it's still pretty male dominated.
Absolutely. So what does BrightLine do today, and for who? Who's your primary client?
So fast forward all the way to today, BrightLine is a software that is integrated into all of the apps that you watch on your television.
Okay.
That wherever there's ad-supported content,
Yep.
our SDK, our software development kit, is providing enhanced advertising experience, whether it's extra content, gaming, shopification, pure like interaction with branded content, and so on. We are the ones who sit inside those apps, and we're pretty much there on our own, which is really, I would say, a testament, to use your word, to being as early as we were, developing the relationships, over those many years, and sort of being a trusted partner and provider of innovative thinking along these lines. So when connected TV took off, the pandemic happened,
Yep.
and streaming exploded, we watched the race, right, toward innovation, and the race toward having a streaming opportunity for viewers, and we're able to benefit from that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I feel like you can't go on LinkedIn without seeing at least like 10 posts related to CTV. Like every single day,
It's true.
every conference track is talking about it. Everyone's starting a company.
Yeah.
So I feel like, your wisdom, I'm sure, is very valuable. So was there a defining moment in your early career that made you specifically start a company within the ad tech space?
I think what I was doing previously was, I always refer to it as extraordinary circumstances. I was in extraordinary circumstances for 12 straight years, and as an industry 15. And it was very unique in the sense of, I was put into a position as employee number one in a small high-end boutique firm that was restructuring banks from top to bottom, end to end, all of the businesses, all of the products, whether it was a retail bank in a branch and how a customer experiences that, or the technology and operational infrastructure in place to deliver that experience.
Yep.
I had this, I'm just very, I guess, privileged or blessed that I had an experience on repeat that
Sure.
that I was able to lead whole organizations through a process of, if your strategy is X and it's a 3-year strategy, given how quickly technology is moving, the real question is, how can you do in 1 year what would ordinarily take 3? Because
Sure.
by the time you get to 3 years, it's not strategic anymore. And so being able to guide whole organizations through a process like that gives you a certain kind of, facility for seeing big picture as
Yeah.
well as granularly, and
Totally.
and seeing where technology can allow you to accelerate your progress toward strategy, whether it's how an ATM is going to work, or whether it is there a middleware technology we can use with our legacy systems so that our investment managers can provide real-time information to their customers and increase that experience. That is, the defining moment was 12 years long. But, as I got to the end of it, I had a talk with the founder and said, hey, listen, this really applies to most things, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't just apply to financial institutions and so on. Let's open up the ambit. Let's go wider.
Yeah.
And he said, I knew this day would come. But the only problem is, it's not broken. So it was a very successful model.
Sure.
And so I kind of, if I wanted to go beyond what I was doing, I really had to get out of that situation in order to find another one, which he was very, very supportive in doing, and actually ended up investing in BrightLine. So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So defining moment in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny that you say that. Like it's sometimes it's not always, or it's usually not one moment, right? There may be like one final moment after
Mhm.
in a series of like moments over the course of multiple years, right? That you're like, you know what, now is the time.
Yeah.
You've been thinking about it, it's been brewing. I'm just gonna do it right now.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot.
It's that balance. It's that sort of, for me, it was that moment in which I was able to contribute more value to the situation and learning to the situation than I was able to derive. And I was in my, early 30s, and thought, I got to do more. I got to do more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I did tell him I was going to leave. I gave him 3 years notice though. And I told him,
Wow.
I'm going to do 2 deals. I'm going to build your team. I'm going to create the perfect transition,
Right.
and then I'm going.
That was very
And
nice.
he really respected that. And I think
Yeah.
that's why we were able to get through it in the supportive way that I was able to do. Yeah.
Totally. And you mentioned the ability to go from that sort of big picture strategic thinking to
Yeah.
tactical
Very
thinking.
important.
I feel like that is a skill that is just so invaluable for leaders, right? Like, and you
Yeah.
learn it
I
as you
agree.
rise to the top.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. It's not only is it, you hope for women that they don't have to realize it later.
Yeah,
Like, there was one piece of like so-called wisdom I would impart is like, look for opportunities, even if it's not in your work environment,
totally.
right? Gives you that freedom and ability to focus both big and small on situations, because you're going to need it.
Totally. So back in 2003, right, when you started it, I imagine it was a very different corporate environment for women, especially, young in your early 30s, starting out. What were some of those initial hurdles that you tackled?
I think the biggest hurdle you tackle in a moment like that is, am I going to be able to raise the money to make this happen?
Sure.
Um, and luckily, I was able to invest in myself,
Yeah.
when I left my other situation, just to get started. And then that doesn't become viable, right? You can't
Right.
just keep doing that.
Yeah.
Um, and waiting for it to become accretive. And so I think the biggest kind of question mark I had, just practical realities of being a woman in business and starting a company, was, am I going to be able to raise the capital?
Yeah.
And, raising capital is always hard.
Totally.
It's,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
excruciating.
Yeah.
So I knew that. But that, I think, was I wouldn't say it was scary, but it was definitely kept me up. One of the things that kept me up at night, was and the way that I solved it, was really going to the executives of the financial institutions whose businesses I helped restructure, and
Wow.
said, I'm doing this now,
Right.
and I would love your support.
Yep.
And to this day, my biggest investors and people on my board, most influential people on my board, are from the financial services industry. So
Wow. That's amazing that you were able to sort of bridge these two. I mean, on the surface, they feel like very different industries, but
yeah, they do.
like it's all, we're all here to make a profit, right? So
It's all the same. Business is business. You know that adage? It's so true.
yeah,
Business is business.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's funny you mentioned, you're like, oh, like I wonder what new, bits of wisdom we can shed on the community here. I feel like we could have a whole podcast episode, like multi-series, about raising money, like
Yeah.
raising capital.
Absolutely.
That is such an interesting point, and I feel like would be terrifying for anyone. So
It is. It's horrifying.
Yeah.
The good thing is, it's kind of like when you have your first child, you don't know, it's going to be a challenge. You don't quite know what you're in for. You don't. The same thing with raising money. It's going to be tough, but you don't know what you're in for. And that's what, allows you to sort of think, millions of people do it every day. I'm just going to go do it.
Right.
And right.
Yeah.
It's the same. And then when you get into it, you're like, this is really hard, you know?
You're like, oh wow, this is a bit of a slap in the face, but I got this. I got
Yes,
this.
exactly.
But it's so good that you were able to build that rapport, right? Like with that sector, like, you know, for
Yes.
so many years, right? Like they
Huge.
trusted you, so they're like, of course I'll invest in you. This woman is obviously capable of doing anything. So this is a safe investment.
It's funny. It's funny that you say that. I do believe one of the biggest other pieces I can say, which is not unique, you'll hear this time and time again, is building really strong relationships.
Totally.
You have those, and people, you know, because they're rare actually. And people remember you, and people appreciate it, and they want to get behind it, you know. And
Yeah.
I would say if I didn't build those relationships, regardless of the experiences I had,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have gotten it done.
Yeah, that's so true. So what do you see on the horizon in ad tech?
Oh,
And
so
yeah,
much.
so much. And how does that apply to you?
We're in a cool position from the standpoint of our continued success is really connected to that migration that is occurring and the increased volume of streams
Right.
delivered by all of these premium content providers, which we know we're sort of at the beginning of, right? The migration, like it's a wave that's moving in. And so I love being in a situation where we can provide value that's been proven, that, you know, that's been embraced and is really just at the beginning. It hasn't even crested yet, right? So that I see, I could be completely wrong, because of course we know some kind of technology might come in and just change everything.
Sure.
But having seen how television has evolved so far from the standpoint of digital and the Internet of Things and all of that, they hold on. It's like a death grip. Like they don't give up and evolve any faster than they need to. It took a pandemic, right? Like it took a pandemic.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of what is happening now as really just getting started, but finally in a place where, you know, we're growing like 40% year over year since the pandemic. It's great. Okay, putting it aside, what do I see? I mean, from an ad tech standpoint, we can start on the digital side of things, because I know that most people who probably are listening to this, when they say ad tech, it's coming from the digital side. And we obviously we were TV first and then moved in. But I think the biggest questions, some of the biggest questions besides data, have to do with like programmatic, right? What's ahead for programmatic?
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing now, you know, some of the new realities that programmatic is starting to have to take a pause and think about, wow, what is ahead for programmatic?
Sure.
Right. So you look at companies like the Trade Desk, who are just like superstars. And even they're struggling now. And I think it's real. I think the struggle will be real because we're out of the pure digital advertising growth trajectory. The pure digital ad trajectory is now shifting, right? And so when you look at, and it'll grow and it'll be fine. But I think a lot of programmatic is banking on connected TV. And I think that is probably not going to work out like they thought. I think that, you know, we're already starting to see this bifurcation where Peacock and Hulu and Disney and Paramount and blah, 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 right? We're starting to see this bifurcation of, we'll put this stuff over on programmatic, but there's this other stuff that we're going to continue to sell upfront style, right?
Sure. So
we're going to do a big deal.
Where's the line between that? Yeah.
I think it's really becoming clearer. I mean, let's wait 12 months and see if I feel the same way. But what I'm seeing now is that I think programmatic is sort of it's like a shock factor. It's like, whoa, Big private networks are growing now. Private
Yeah.
deals increasing. You know, does the upfront look the same? Probably not. But this is the new
Right.
version of the right. People want to buy premium content upfront so
Yep.
they can plan around it. Sports is a
Right.
huge. Digital is still doesn't really understand that it's not going to prevail upon TV. I think it never did. And I don't think it's going to. And I think that the fundamental difference is premium content has a lot of economics attached to it that
Totally.
are generated completely differently than digital. And so long answer to your question.
No, it's really insightful. And again, I feel like we could go down a super long rabbit hole, but I feel like, they, at the end of the day, they will always complement one another, right? So I feel like it is the ad tech industry sort of job to like bridge any potential gaps, whether it's programmatically or otherwise. So I'm fully with you on that. Love talking to you about ad tech, but I want to learn, and I want the audience to learn a little bit more about your other endeavors. So SustainChain is one that's really interesting to me and close to my heart. I think values-based marketing is super important, but it has to have substance to it, right? Like you can't just say like, oh, hey, like I care about the planet. It's like, well, what are you doing for the planet? And you are actually doing things. So please tell us a little bit more about that endeavor.
I can tell you, thank you. That's very kind, and I'm so happy that it's near and dear to your heart. And I can tell you that, regardless of the atmosphere we're in, it means a lot to a lot of people. And I am really gratified every day. Basically, it gives me hope in terms of the momentum that we're seeing on SustainChain. But what is SustainChain? So SustainChain was birthed out of basically a request by some folks who were very heavily, involved with something called the Millennium Villages Project. That's where I started to kind of cross over into outside of the pure business realm and into economic development. It's where, what I academically, where I was geared, and I found an opportunity to come back into it with the Millennium Villages Project, which was architected by Professor Jeffrey Sachs, who is a genius. He's a genius. Right. Yeah. So when I was asked to come in and help with that, honestly, I was flabbergasted and I had no words. And of course, I first said no, and I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. He said, you can do it. You could do it. And I'm so glad that he did, because we've been working together for about 15 years now. And what happened at the end of the Millennium Villages Project was around 2016. It was the end of 2015, starting 2016, was the Sustainable Development Goals, which came from the UN. And as I said, some people who were very involved in the Africa work really liked that I was able to do this big picture, top down, bottom up thing, and actually bridge business with big problems like that. Right. Yep. So they said, these business folks said, to me, business is at the center of accomplishing anything in terms of sustainability ultimately. So can you put some thoughts down on this? Right. And it was pandemic, and I managing your company through the pandemic took a certain amount of, you have to go to a calm place, right? You have to be ready to react or respond, but you can't panic, right? Yeah. Yep. So this actually allowed me to, I don't think I would have managed as well through the pandemic for BrightLine if I didn't have this other thing that I was asked to do. Long and short was, sustainability at the core comes down to securing our basic needs as humans. So it's not about the planet going away. It's about us going away, right? Yep. And so food security, water security, and energy. Totally. Okay. So how do you do that? Well, I think we learned it in the pandemic. You need strong, viable supply chains. Yeah. When you think about strong, viable supply chains in the context of climate change, you realize, okay, supply chains are evolving every day.
Yeah.
They have to, right? They have to be resilient, and they have to be able to weather, crises like the pandemic, and
Yep.
weather crises like the weather, right? Like, so
true.
SustainChain was designed in the very same way that BrightLine was designed, was the very same way as I did the work in the banking industry. It was done off a clean sheet of paper to say, if we have to rebuild supply chains in order to get into a position to achieve sustainability and secure food, water, and energy, let's keep it simple.
Sure.
What do we need to do to be in position to be getting that done every single day?
Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
it's not as easy as you think, because even though there's so many people who really do care or have to care because they're in a business where they realize, like, they don't have a business unless they figure this out.
Right.
And that group is getting bigger and bigger, thank God.
Yeah.
But you have to sort of account for the fact that in as much as people are doing things, it's a completely opaque space. It's a completely fragmented space. Literally the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. There's wasted capital on overlapping activities. There's wasted capital on things that have already been tried and failed. So it's like, how do we get people in a position where they're not reinventing the wheel?
Yeah.
Where investors can get behind things that build off of other people's, the strength of their work or their successes.
Yep.
We're able to integrate these individual pieces, and then big picture, get into a position where we can say global supply chains around aluminum's role in, architecture and so on. How do we actually know we're making progress? That's what SustainChain was designed to do. It was designed off a clean sheet of paper, and it really is simple. That sounds really complicated, right? But it doesn't work unless it's simple. So simply speaking, anyone who is involved in supply chain sustainability, regardless of your industry, regardless of where you fit on a supply chain or what you're trying to accomplish, you're able to come into SustainChain, where AI is connecting what you do with what you need and who's available to provide it, best practices, resources, funding, policy initiatives, right? And so that's what we launched, and we launched it back in 2000, at the end of 2000, like the end of 2000.
Wow.
We went straight from a paper, design on paper to release one. And I guess it's really exciting. The big thing that's exciting about it is that when you're able to show people that you're not just able to talk about what's wrong with the situation, but you're able to say, but here's a way to help, and here it is. Yeah. People are just like, oh my God, you actually did it? Like, this should have existed 1,000,000 years ago.
Yep.
Now it's here. So that's where the momentum is coming from. And really just what I've found all throughout is true. It's like, you have to make things concrete. Like, if I hadn't told you SustainChain exists and when it does, right? It sounds smart, I guess, everything I just told you, but so what?
Sure. It has to be practical and applicable also. Yeah.
Be real, right? It has to be real. Yeah. So anyway.
And you have been able to turn that into a reality and added value across multiple industries. I mean, that's amazing. So do you see that this line of business really taking off over the next few years?
It's all, here's the thing. I do this as a public service. I don't get paid to do any of it. Not the bill, right. Yeah. So it's all about supporting the network and supporting the tech, and the tech is bleeding edge. And so the idea is that if we can embed SustainChain into the communities that would get the most value from it and have it respond in the way that social media does, that's our best attempt at being in a position to help. So, and it's a lifelong passion, and this one thing that will not go away for me until I die. And so, whether it takes off or not, most importantly to me is that it exists. Yeah. And if people are serious about it and they want to take responsibility and hold each other accountable for it, there's a way to do
There's
that.
a solution. Yeah, exactly. That's wonderful. So Jackie, how do you balance your time, right, between your, your business, your philanthropic efforts, your family, how do you do it all?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think I don't know, but I think what's part of it is your conditioning is everything. You can condition yourself to do, right? It's like, you think of a world-class athlete, it's conditioning, right?
Sure. Yep.
And Aston, that original situation was 100-hour weeks, back to 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 back, top down, bottom up, end to end, blah, blah, blah. And it was on a definitive timeline. Every
Right.
single one of those had a definitive timeline. You
Sure.
learn through the situations like that, that compartmentalization
Right.
is key.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can tell you that it's compartmentalization,
Sure.
the ability to focus, meditation
Yeah.
is absolutely key. And I remember my partner telling me, he's really my boss, but my boss told me, he's like, the only way you're going to get to any level beyond where you are now is like meditation. And
Wow.
that's when I started to meditate.
Wow.
Right. And so I would say having kids a little later, like having a little bit of maturity that was sort of rooted in experience and having the confidence that comes from that.
Yep.
And then having these kind of, being conditioned in these ways, like compartmentalization and the way to think about things and the clean sheet.
Also, I feel like resourcefulness, like you can't speak enough for that. Like,
yeah, you're right.
To your point, you're conditioned to be resourceful and to make stuff happen no matter what gets thrown your way. So suddenly you're a mother and you're like, oh, wow, I've got to do all of this on top, like being a mother, right? On top of my job, you just become super efficient and effective, I feel like, and really good at planning. So you
don't become the fan favorite of moms in schools necessarily. I mean, I will tell you.
That's fair. Yeah.
How could you possibly be getting it all done? Like, but it's great. When you bring joy to what you do and that joy comes through in everything else you do, like it's just truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And look, we're not all meant to do the same thing either, so I feel like we complement one another. Our children learn from us and everyone's better.
That's right. That's right. I couldn't agree more.
So what would be one piece of advice? I know you've said, a lot of very helpful nuggets here, but, to other women looking to build and scale either their careers or their business, one thing.
Believe you can do it.
Yeah.
I mean, believe you can do it. Believe that you're smart enough. Believe that, you have the tools. Believe that, because the reality is nobody does. Right. And it goes back to your resourcefulness thing. And by the way, no one's perfect. Nothing's perfect. It's a myth.
Totally.
Right. So like, it's kind of a dance to me, like life and sort of happiness comes from this like constant dance of like, choosing what makes you happy, like channeling energy in that way, that to me, it's that, because when it comes down to it, it's like, no one's got a monopoly on intelligence or money or beauty or anything, right? Like do you, and try and allow yourself to maintain a desire to find and do and experience, and the balance will come.
Yeah, you're so right, Jackie. That's really well said. Well, thank you so much for your time. I have learned so much and I would love to continue this conversation at some point.
Absolutely. I'm here.
Perfect. Yeah, not far down the road for me. So that's great.
No,
but so Jackie, if people want to learn more about you, your businesses, how can they do that?
Yeah. Oh, but by the way, I have an upcoming book and it's coming out later this year. It's called Changemaker, the modern playbook for personal impact and transformational change. Wow. And it basically takes this whole thing we've been talking about and saying, You can do it. And it's actually not as complicated as you think,
Sure.
right? It's not easy, but
Right.
it's doable and,
Right.
and it's manageable.
Yeah.
And it all depends on how you attack it and what kind of energy you bring to it. That's
Sure.
what the book is going to show.
Yep.
And so, yeah, and so I'll be, have that out there if they want to learn anything more. And
Yep.
listen, they can LinkedIn, reach
Yep.
out,
LinkedIn, guys, LinkedIn her. Perfect. Well, thank you again, Jackie. Again, this is Lauren Burke from LJS Advisory. We are so thankful for all of you tuning in to these really impactful conversations. And everyone, enjoy the rest of your Women's History Month.